You're listening to Weather Brains. They're kind of a big deal.
Allegedly kind of a big deal. Hey, this is Weather Brains episode number 824. This is for the 1st of November, 2021. Thanksgiving getting close, Christmas down the line. It's going to be a really, really good show tonight. I can't wait to get into this, so we'll kind of zip through this real quick. First off, let's welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Weather Brains after an absence, a sabbatical. Rick Smith is back.
Yay!
Hey.
Yes.
Thank you. Honored and privileged and happy to be back. I don't know if we'll see how it goes toward by the end of the show, but yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and man, what a night to come back.
Yeah, this is going to be a great show. We are honored that you're back, and everybody got really excited when the breaking news broke here on the show a couple of weeks ago. So you hop in anytime. Also, I see the lovely Aubrey Urbanowitz from Harrisonburg, Virginia, and have the colors peaked? Are the leaves off the trees now?
They're still at peak. It's unbelievable. There's usually a period of catch up, even if our higher elevations are delayed a little bit. There's usually a period of catch up in Virginia around mid-October, and we never hit that period. Everything has just been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. So, and I've never had it to where almost all of our area between 2,000 feet and about 3,800 feet is at peak, West Virginia and Virginia. Since I've been doing this. So the whole area is beautiful right now. We don't have any high wind coming in this week, even with a little clipper tomorrow. So the fall color is going to last for the rest of the week, the weekend. And if we're lucky, maybe into the early part of next week as it kind of trickles down below 2,000 feet. So things are looking quite amazing right now.
That's likely awesome because typically by the 1st of November, the peak kind of shifts down this way a little bit. So that's
absolutely
very good. Let's see. Dr. Jacobs, how is your hand recovery going?
It's good. I'm out of the brace. I finally back to able to reply to emails. And I got my porch finished with my left hand. So that was an accomplishment. I didn't want the trick-or-treaters falling into the crawl space.
Show title.
Show title.
Yeah, all right. So Troy, what's on your mind?
Not really all that much. I mean, we got up 82 degrees today out at Camp Mabry and 81 out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. So temperatures have rebounded nicely, but I can live with this for a few days because, Kim, we know what's coming. So some of that cooler air is headed south through the Plains States. So I'm looking forward to that. And also for us anyway, where we have tended to be a little dry of late, maybe WPC is saying anywhere between about maybe half, maybe 1 inch of rainfall, and we could use that for Austin. So pretty good in the south central part of Texas.
And Dr. Cloco McLean, once again, dealing with more severe weather. What's the deal with you?
No, and it really does feel like it's just me. It's like they're targeting me. Yeah, we had another QLCS tornado within a mile of my house, actually between me and Chuck, or just a little bit east of us. But in our neck of the woods, Chuck, are you feeling targeted? I'm feeling targeted.
I'm happy to see it.
I actually kind of poked the bear a little bit. The Severe Storms Lab has a weekly sort of pandemic time tag up, and on Friday I just asked, is anybody looking at are there urban effects with tornado genesis? I don't want to be one of the tinfoil hat people who says tornadoes go here and not there. And Rick and I have heard this up and down for Norman, that the river is this shield force. And Rick, when you go out and do your surveys, you guarantee that you will find evidence that the tornado crossed the river.
Baythird 99 pretty well disproved that theory.
Yep. One would think, but that hit more, Chuck, not Norman. That was more.
But it was the same river.
Yeah, it was the river. It was
that mighty Canadian river.
Yes.
Oh, okay. If it makes any difference, Kim, I still have a huge, big old dumpster sitting in the driveway. So if you need one, let me know. I'll send it up there to Norman. But,
I have it. I have a community, Kim, where the people. I was at a Rotary Club, and some guy said ever since they built this interstate bypass around the city, tornadoes never come through there anymore. We have the same problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just build interstate bypasses then. That's all we need.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, our conversation in the lab, all of the people who do boundary layer research got really fired up, and they said, this is our moment. Actually, we think that there are some effects that urban areas can have on tornadogenesis under certain conditions, in addition to other topographic things that have been explored in Vortex Southeast. So all that to say, I'm going to keep you all updated. I think my house will serve as a useful indicator, leading indicator for this research area.
So, Kim, do I hear a child in the background?
Possibly, yeah. Welcome to my house. It's that's the sound of.
I
this
like
house
it.
Most,
I like
most
it.
Of the time.
No, most of us have been there, done that. So let's get right into the meat of this thing. And tonight on the show, we wanted to celebrate the life of Al Mohler. And for those of you that did not know him or don't know who he is, those of you that are younger, this is a great opportunity to learn about this man and his career and his contributions to the science. And to celebrate his life, we have two legends we're bringing on the show here tonight. And let me just say, you heard Dr. Doswell's voice. Dr. Charles Doswell probably knows more about severe local convective storms than any human being on the planet. And what he has done for the science community, it's just astounding. Are you technically retired, Chuck?
I am fully and totally retired.
Aren't you still doing your storm chase adventures in the spring?
No, I retired from them 2 years ago.
Well, goodness gracious. Well. Anyway, thanks for being on the show tonight. It's an honor to have you on here as always. So, and again, let me bring in Tim Marshall too. Most of you know that Tim, he's the great meteorologist, engineer, amazing photographer, the storm survey guy. When there's a major tornado, you want him on your survey because he understands the issues better than anybody else with Hague Engineering. And Tim, thanks again for coming on the show tonight, and thanks for spending some time with us to talk about our friend Al Mohler.
You bet.
So, Chuck, first off, you go back a long way with Al, and let me just say this. I'll tell you my Al Mohler story. The first time I saw him was the film Terrible Tuesday. Have you guys ever seen that?
Oh yeah.
In fact, I'll give you a warning, that's my pick of the week. But I saw that, and that's the first time I saw Al. I'd heard of him, but that's the first time I saw him on camera. And I would ultimately be transferred to Dallas in the mid-1980s from Birmingham. I went to the CBS channel then, which was Channel 4, and it was a transfer. I did not apply for the job. I was just told you're going to Dallas, which was great. I made many new friends, and I went to a local AMS chapter meeting or NWA or something in Arlington, and Al Mohler was the speaker. And first words out of his mouth, when it comes to thunderstorms, expect the unexpected. And he went through some case studies, and it was one of the greatest presentations I've ever heard. I was spellbound. And from that day, I've been an Al Mohler fan. So Chuck, let's go back to when did you first meet Al? When did you establish a relationship with him?
I got back from my military service in 1972, and I dropped into Norman to sort of rekindle my graduate education. And I arrived there, and all of a sudden I found myself surrounded by a bunch of really crazy people who actually wanted to go out and chase storms. And I'd been sort of kicking around the idea and made a few abortive forays. But that's when my storm chasing began. And that was with the so-called Tornado Intercept project that was led by Joe Golden at NSSL. But I was a student at OU at the time, and my advisor, who was also Al's advisor, Yoshi Sasaki, the late Yoshi Sasaki, he gave us a green light to participate in chasing, so it kind of took off from there. My first impression of Al, and please forgive me for youthful indiscretions. But I actually sort of thought of Al as kind of another Texas redneck. And so he didn't make a great impression on me right away. But when chasing with him, I really began to see his sort of defining characteristic, and that was intensity. When he believed in something, when he wanted something, he did so intensely and with passion. And that was the kind of person I kind of wanted to be around in the storm chasing business. He and I shared, as it turned out, more than storm chasing as a passion, drag racing, blues music, all sorts of things were common ground for us. So it became pretty easy when I finally graduated to and moved to my new job in Kansas City. It was natural for me to want a chase partner, and Al was the logical choice for that.
So I have this mental picture of Chuck and Al drag racing on the streets, wild storm chasing, listening to blues music. I mean, I just see the whole package here. So Tim Marshall, go back. When did you establish a relationship with Al?
Well, Al, as you know, was in the National Weather Service here in the Fort Worth area. And I knew him first as a storm chaser. Chuck and Al used to come out to West Texas. They used to stop by the National Weather Service, get briefings there. I was out at the National Weather Service in Lubbock there at that time. I was part of the weather modification program, and I was there for satellite monitoring. So I met them there, and also Storm Track was around in the so they were contributors to Storm Track. So, I think first as maybe storm chasing, and then, Al was in Fort Worth, and then he got transferred over to Lubbock. So got to really know him, go on chases with him. So, I'm not sure exactly the timeline. It was in the 70s sometime, late 70s. And that's where we forged a relationship, because we both have this unending passion for storms and storm chasing. And that right there, he was my brother in that regard. Mm-hmm. We just have this tremendous bond. And no matter how tired we get, you start bringing up storm stories. This is way before the TWC thing. And we just were, like reignited with energy. They have monster drinks for that today. But back in those days, storm stories was our monster drink.
Yeah, for sure.
Guys, and again, for those that don't know, Al passed away tragically in 2014 at the age of 64, way too young. But tell me a little bit about what it was like on those early storm chases, because you didn't have radar scope, and you didn't have, cell phones and internet access and tablets and all the technology we have today. What was it like back in the 1970s and early 80s on a storm chase?
Well, for us as OU students, of course, we had access to our OU map room, and that was kind of the focus for our sort of self-briefings. And we would try to apply the science we were learning in our classes to the task of trying to make decisions about where to go and so forth, or whether to go at all. So the weather room was kind of the nexus where we made our forecast using all of the information, how limited it was, at our disposal. And then you went out and you chased the storm, and you hoped that you were close enough that if you didn't get it right, perfectly right, so that you just drove right to the tornadoes, if you didn't get it perfectly right, you had time to recover. And so we missed a lot of storms back in those days. Not having satellite imagery and radar was a tremendous handicap. There'd be some clouds in the way between you and the storm, and you couldn't see it. And if you can't see it, you're not going to chase it. So we missed our share of storms, but we also caught our share. It was a lot different back then.
Tim, what were your memories of early chasing? What was it like?
Well, for the first 8 years, I didn't have air conditioning in a car. And
Wow.
We stopped at the payphone back in those days and called
That's right.
a radar operator at the Lubbock or Amarillo Weather Service, and they would look on their in the Amarillo, it was the WSR 57, so that's 1957 radar. And although it had some enhancements, basically they were looking at blobs, echoes that were just blobs. And then this thing came along called VIP levels, and that was like the holy grail of radar. When we saw, wow, you can actually detect intensity of these. Well, we were obviously looking for, hook echoes, and the radar operator was looking for collapsing tops and things like that, give us an idea of where an isolated storm would be. And we go from there. And it would just be all visual. So if there's a storm, and then we're chasing from Lubbock, and there's a storm that pops up near Dodge City, we would never know about it until that night when we got back. And they were saying, all these tornadoes happen near Dodge City. And we're going, what? So we would never have the real-time information that we have today, and we're so spoiled with today. Yes. But at the same time, it was nicer in a way now that I think about it, because if I'm, say, in Amarillo and there's a tornadic storm at Dodge City and I know about it, that's almost worse than if you find out later on that you missed it, But if you're sitting there and you know what the result of your forecast was wrong, if I know about my forecast was wrong maybe 7-8 hours from now, that's fine. But it's better than if you know that, I made a mistake. I should have been up there.
We found that there were a lot of events that would occur, of course, that maybe only one or two people got to. But so that meant that with a relatively small number of chases, you could be spread out over a pretty big territory. And it would be interesting that occasionally you would get chaser convergence with maybe one other or two other vehicles. And chaser convergence back then was joyful and a fun experience. You'd meet people out there in the middle of a godforsaken nowhere in Texas somewhere. And it was a fun treat. Obviously, as time has gone on, chaser convergence has gotten kind of out of control. It's pretty much every day you have to fight traffic jams at the site.
Mm-hmm. It's great when you meet them. It's a different
game.
Yeah. If I met Chuck and Al out there, some intersection near Stratford or something,
right.
It was great. We sit and talk, and Al was always just hyped up. Even in the most marginal situation, he was saying, Tim, this looks like Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls. And I go, well, what do you? No, it's not. It's not exactly like Wichita Falls. That's the 1979 outbreak I'm talking about. But but he was that excited. He was just always in overdrive.
That's true.
That was exactly what I wanted to ask about. It sounds like he was a really enthusiastic person. So tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, it sounds like he just had unbridled enthusiasm as you were out chasing, which can be a really helpful attribute when you're facing something, especially with long odds, as you faced chasing back then. But can you tell us a little bit more just about the chase experience with him? You shared a love for music. I bet that he had a great love for the travel piece as well, and just watching the environment as it evolved. What was all of that like?
What we found there's so much to talk about. I could probably take up 2-3 hours, but one of the things that became very clear to us early on was that what we read in the textbooks had only dubious relationship with what we actually saw out in the real weather. But it was interesting. You think of a dry line for example, if you picture a dry line, what your picture is the line with the scallops on it. and it's something that you draw on a piece of paper. But then when you go out there, you could actually see the dry line by certain physical things it was doing, like towering cumulus along the dry line. And it sort of made your classroom experience more interesting because you actually saw what it looked like with the various phenomena. And that was something that I was really found unexpected. And, I'm not saying that that was the source of any great scientific inspiration, but it made the classroom experience more real to me, to be able to relate a weather map to what's actually going on in the weather. And there's no guarantee that actually you can do that. So it was a kind of a challenge then to take what we had learned and try to adapt our efforts to get more successful, because successes were pretty few and far between. It was not unlikely in any given year that I wouldn't see any tornadoes, for example. It was just after a 2-week chase, you ran out of opportunities and was over. But it's been a struggle to continue to relate our chase experiences to the storms, or to the meteorology you learn in class. Maybe Kim could speak more accurately about what's going on in class now. But for me, I felt like most of the professors and professionals around us thought we were just a bunch of crazies. And they didn't respect what we were doing. They didn't respect what we were trying to do. And it was just discouraging. You were talking about what was it like chasing with Al. Okay. One of the things I could guarantee you was going to happen in a 2-week storm chase with Al is we would have at least one shouting match. Al and I are both sort of people that held strong opinions, and we'd end up in a weather office yelling at each other. And at one time, I think it was in Lubbock, they asked us to leave because we were making so much noise.
Wow.
Yeah, so we kind of crept out of there with our tail between our legs, and that never happened again. If we were going to have a shouting match, we took it outside. But that was the way it went with Al. I mean, he was passionate, and that passion sometimes leads you to clash. But, that was a small price to pay, and it never affected our friendship. We could be screaming at each other, and 5 minutes later, we're best of buddies. That's just the way it went. We never let passion become an enemy to us. It was interesting with Al. He had a very different perspective on things because, of course, he was an operational forecaster. And I can say honestly that Al made a huge impact on my professional career because I recognized that he was trying to apply science to the whole task, and that was kind of my personal goal, was to generate new science that would help improve the forecasting. And so Al was very much service oriented. And the more he talked to me, the more I realized how valuable his insights were. For example, he led me down a path that was associated with trying to rats. I'm losing my train of thought. This happens to me in my declining years. Where was I?
I'm in there with you, brother.
Oh, you lost it too.
Yeah.
Well,
no, Troy, pick
it
up.
Go ahead. Really great.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention, Chuck and Tim, good to see you both, and thank you for your valuable time and being here with us tonight. But I want to throw in another name, and I do this, Chuck, because of something you did. and it's still on your website, on your blog site, was the tribute you gave at the end of May of last year, in the middle of all this COVID crap, when we lost Les Lemon.
Yeah.
And Les, was so important on the radar side, and your thoughtful tribute to Les, who I happen to know. He had to be part of this, getting those 5 Tim VIP levels, and we just didn't know what to do with them all. And Les did all that. I had to throw that name in tonight because Les was a hell of a guy.
I don't mind that a bit. Les also had a big impact on my career.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. One of the projects we worked on with Al, actually, was the development of the first spotter training slide series. And of course, we worked on the Chase, the first spotter movie in recent history in the 70s. And we applied what we learned storm chasing to storm spotting. And that was first a path that Al inspired me to pursue. I actually gave spotter talks for a few years in Oklahoma City, for the Oklahoma City office. Nobody knew those slides any better than I did, because we had argued about them for months. But I really got a great deal of enjoyment out of giving spotter talks. I could see how it might become burdensome if you have to go to 100 counties. But the few that I did were really inspirational, and the people who were spotters were volunteering their time and efforts for nothing. They got no remuneration whatsoever. And yet, of course, they were providing an extremely valuable service. So the idea of helping them be better at what they do was important to us, both Al and me. That was when I got the first glimmerings of something that became very important. There's this question of what is an effective product, an effective warning. And so I actually had to sit down and think about, well, what actually does it take? So, for example, the first criterion that a warning has to meet in order to be effective is it has to be issued. And it has to reach the intended audience. They have to be able to understand it. They have to believe in it. And they have to be ready and prepared and willing to take the appropriate action to protect themselves. So there's this whole series of events, and any one of them, if the chain is broken, the warning is no longer effective. And that was a principle that really made sense to me, and that came out of years of listening to Al go on about his efforts in storm spotting. He was the premier WCM before the WCM even existed. So, of course, he got passed over for promotion to WCM because he was sufficiently passionate that he liked to tell regional management exactly what they were doing wrong.
Oh.
And that never won him any popularity contests in the regional office. And so he never got that promotion. I think it's really a crime that he didn't serve as a WCM for Fort Worth, because I know he would have been the best they ever had. As it was, he was the best spotter trainer by far.
It's really interesting to think that he was never, before there was a WCM, there was a WPM, a warning preparedness meteorologist. Essentially, that was just something you did as a forecaster in your, quote, free time as a focal point or a program manager. And it's amazing to think what Al did while he was working shifts and as a, shift working forecaster and everything he was able to do. Chuck, you were talking about the video that you guys made, and that was really my first exposure to Al, because when I was starting out at the Memphis office, I forgot what they were still showing. Terrible Tuesday, I think, when we did spotter training, which is okay. It's not a spotter training video, but we eventually got into showing the Tornado of Spotters guide that Al did, and that's my pick of the week. If hopefully I'm going to claim it right now before anybody else gets it, but we dubbed that over and it's on our YouTube site. But and it's interesting how much that you watch that video 50 times, or you hear it night after night doing spotter training, and the little sayings that Al had kind of stick in your brain. And I specifically remember out storm chasing, and we were still kind of in the payphone era, but we would have our amateur radios and we'd be in a caravan and kind of talking back and forth from car to car, and we would invariably start quoting the spotter's guide, like, it's dark here because there's a 10-mile thickness of cloud above you, and when you can see the wall cloud rotate, it's dangerous. Those things are just embedded in my head, and just hearing Al's voice saying that is just, I can still hear it today.
Yeah, Al and I did a storm chase way back. When was it? 1980 something, and we were chasing around Doherty, Texas, and we had a failure in our chase the day before, and so we were kind of down. So we intercepted this storm, and I can still hear Al, and it's on my video recorded on the soundtrack. He says, "The chase is made." He was so excited about that event that he just couldn't help himself, and that was very typical. The chase is made. Yeah, it was all gravy from there, as he put it. But that was kind of the fun part about chasing with Al. He was so spontaneous. You got pretty much what he was thinking at that time all the time. He just would erupt into things that you maybe didn't expect. Of course, after a while, I came to expect a lot of them. But after chasing with him for more than 20 years.
Hey, Tim, talk about the Union City tornado back in 73 and Al's involvement in chasing that thing.
I think you need to talk to Chuck about that. That was before I arrived on the scene. Yeah,
he was with us. It was me, John McGinley, Randy Zipser, and Al in John McGinley's Mustang, and we were an unofficial OU chase team, not the official Tornado Intercept project. We drove out past a developing storm near Union City. Didn't realize what it was. And we kept on going farther northwest, reached a point where it was pretty obvious that we were out of position. So we called back to NSSL, got some radar information, and Burgess told us to get the hell back to Union City. It's where you need to be. And so we were able to intercept the storm as it was leaving the town. So when we drove into town, people were still in their hidey holes, and they started to come out after we stopped and started taking pictures. Al took one of the greatest pictures of that tornado I think I can ever imagine. He moved to where he could look down the tornado track with all the devastation in the foreground. And then here's this elephant trunk tornado in his picture. It's just a sensational image.
Chuck, did you guys punch the core and get any hail?
Yes, we did. To both. The hail wasn't very big. It was maybe marble to a little bit bigger. Maybe it would meet severe criteria. But we did have to punch the core to get to that tornado. That was because of some other issues that had happened earlier. That we finally had to come in from the northwest, and that sort of said core punch is the only chance. But that was when I began to put two and two together, and I got to thinking about it. If we had been there 5 minutes earlier, we would have been right where the tornado emerged out of the murk. and could have been, pretty well blown away. And so I became a big enemy of core punching. And I've remained that way to this day. I think it's just a stupid tactic. But, we had to learn that the hard way. Did you
guys ever did you ever feel in danger on any of these early chases, Tim and Chuck?
Not me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was one incident where Al Mohler's seatbelt stuck. They abandoned.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, that was a big day, and I couldn't chase that day because I had schoolwork to do. So I had to not chase. Well, Al chased with a couple of friends, another unofficial chase team, and they got down towards Davis, Oklahoma, and all of a sudden the dissipating Davis tornado was on them. And Al was trying to get out of the car and seek shelter, and he couldn't get the damn seatbelt opened up. So he just had to ride it out.
And let's talk about photography. You talk about this amazing photograph from the Union City, Oklahoma tornado. You guys didn't have digital photography back then. Talk about taking pictures. It was a different world.
Well, of course, film was a big limiting factor in what you could do. It necessarily had pretty strong limits on its capabilities. And, of course, if you had a really contrasty scene, some of it was going to be over and some of it was going to be underexposed. So it was always a struggle trying to get the right exposure. As far as the cameras themselves, they worked pretty similarly to a modern camera, at least a digital SLR. It just film was the big difference.
And did you guys shoot video at all, or just stills only?
I shot video. Al never did video. He wanted to get those great photographs and maybe even sell a few of them.
8mm and 16mm film as well. It was shot by several chasers in that day.
Yeah, right. We started out in the Tornado Intercept project. I was telling you about the fact that some students and I were part of a chase team from the university. So was Al, of course. But we would find ourselves behind the eight ball, if you will, and it was always a struggle to get the right kind of match between the film and what the atmosphere was showing you. And so it was kind of wasteful. Plus, we never got a chance to look at the image until we got it processed. And so that was really a big issue. With digital SLRs, you can take a shot and say, I'm underexposed. I'm going to have to fix that. With film, if you guess the exposure wrong, you were screwed.
Plus, you only get 24 or 36 shots off before you have to wind it back.
Yep.
And tornadoes in progress, right?
Right.
Wind it back. Okay. Yep. You're shaking and nervous and everything. You open the back of it and it flops out and falls on the ground. And you're just fumbling around with it. You got to get the new roll in. You got to string the new roll in. And
that's tricky.
That. The tornado's going. And you're doing that. So, we got it easy today compared to what it was back in those days.
We still managed to get some nice images. And
yep.
Al and I both got bitten by the photography bug at about the same time. My original goal was just to get pictures of storms. But when you storm chase, as I'm sure you understand, Tim, there are days when there's nothing to chase. So what do? Well, what we would do would be to drive around the countryside and find interesting places and interesting scenes to photograph.
Oh, yeah.
And then it became kind of a feedback process with Al. He and I would take different pictures. We'd go to different locations and shoot different angles and different lenses. And then we would get together at the end of the chase season. And then we'd have this gigantic slideshow. And we'd criticize or compliment, if they were deserved, the images of our friend. And that was a feedback process that I think made us both better photographers. Al became really accomplished.
Let's talk about the communications. Did anybody have a ham radio license in the 70s among your chase groups, or how did you communicate? If not,
I didn't. We did. There wasn't much communication, as Tim has mentioned. Essentially, it was pay phones, or once in a while, if you were chasing with the rich boys, you might have a radio telephone. But calling back was, you mostly had to use pay phones and then hope that the guy who picked up the phone in the office was somebody whose word you could trust. It perhaps should come as no surprise that not everybody in a forecast office is equal. And sometimes you get somebody that you really didn't want to talk to. But, that was what you had to do.
Tim, have you got a ham license?
No, I mooched off of other ham radio people I used to take.
Carson.
So, Carson, came up to my door in 1988 and said, "Hey, I got a chase mobile. You want to, team up?" And his chase mobile was amazing. Being an electronics person, he just rigged it all up, and the same for Sam Barraclough. So. Yeah, I got to know these guys early on, and they were the ham radio operators that helped greatly.
Yeah. Yep. We had some good folks that we had with us.
Oh yeah.
Talk about the 1982 Panhandle tornado that Al got on. Everybody else went to Kansas. Al went to the Panhandle. He caught one up there.
I'm having trouble picturing that event.
It's Borger, Chuck. It's the Borger one.
Oh my God. I'm gonna have to tell this story.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. Okay. The Borger tornado. Okay. I'm working in cells at the time, and I was on the work schedule for a shift, the swing shift, starting that afternoon. So I had to be back in back in Kansas City by that prior evening. So I basically had to go. But before I went, I called the office and I begged somebody to take my shift. And they wouldn't do it. Nobody would do it. And so about 10 o'clock that night, there's a phone call in cells, and it's Al. And he's calling to gloat. And he says, Chuck, you missed it. It was great. You went on and on and on. And I saw his pictures, and they were fantastic. And so I never forgave the office for that one. I harbored a grudge on that for most of my career. It was so frustrating. Because I had never, when I worked shifts, it was always as fill-in. So somebody, their daughter is graduating from music school or something, and I can't be there for this shift. Please come in and work it for me. I never said no to such a request in the 6 years I was there. And I made one request. One request. By that fall, I was working in Boulder.
That day, the Panhandle was heavily capped. There was no chance of any storms going up there. So we left Lubbock and we drove up to Perryton, and certainly the target was north of Perryton. And it was like a rogue storm that developed very late there. Near Borger. If you've seen photos of it, you see how striated it looked.
Oh, yeah.
Because when it busted the cap, it was just like an atom bomb. It was just layers and layers of cloud there. It was spinning around. So the true classic barber pole was what it was. And tremendous structure and large hail. It was kind of a hybrid kind of storm, but it was certainly developed in an area that was heavily capped. No one expected it. And Al, I think, lagged behind part of me thinks that he lagged behind because he couldn't leave until a certain time, because I think he was either working in Lubbock at the time, or that he just thought he's just going to take a chance on something further south, like a rogue storm developing, rather than have, a mess developing up in Kansas. Let's go with the chance that maybe something can pop up farther south. So
somehow Al managed to anticipate that more southerly storm.
Right.
I have to this day, no idea what means he had to deduce that. But he did tell me that he looked at the storms in Kansas from a distance, and they looked mushy and weak to him. And
they were.
He just said, I'm not interested in that. So he hung around, evidently on the belief that there was at least a dim possibility of something. I want to mention something about that strong capping. One of the things that's very characteristic of those pictures of that Borger storm is the lower part of the storm that you see is laminar. And what that means is that negatively buoyant air is being lifted. You get that laminar look to things when the air in the updraft is negatively buoyant. So, and I didn't realize that then, but, the first time I saw that kind of structure, I became a structure fanatic. And Al was pretty much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Good structure was almost as good as a tornado.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, in my opinion, when you look at everybody's pictures of tornadoes, an awful lot of really lousy pictures get published. Poor contrast, shaky video, and all that. With Al, you got everything crystal sharp. And so if there was structure to be had, he would capture it. Yeah, he gloated about that, but, I don't really begrudge him that. It's just, I had my issues with The Office.
I want to go back to some of the aspects of shooting with film real quick, because I'm fascinated with a lot of the high resolution video that I see now. And I feel like a lot of times, particularly from angles that we can get with drones, we can see a lot of stuff that we hadn't seen before. What was it like back then when you're shooting with film and you've only got a couple of limited shots you can take to capture the actual action and as it was occurring? And were you developing your own film, or were you sending it off? What was that wait like before you actually got feedback on the images?
That wait was agony, especially if you thought you had a good one. But sometimes it also led to a pleasant surprise. I caught a lightning shot at sunset one day, and I had been, using a certain technique to capture daytime lightning where you hold the shutter open. And so I was doing that, and I looked away from what I was doing for maybe 2 seconds. And when I got back, I just said, okay, that's the end of that exposure. I'll move on. When I got the film back 2 weeks later, that one shot was just sensational. It was so good that National Geographic bought it. So that's the kind of thing that would happen, a happy accident. But the film handicap was more than just sort of the inconvenience of having only 24 or 36 exposures. That was a problem where you got into the middle of great stuff and then suddenly you have to change your film. That's when you develop the 10 thumb syndrome. You start dropping things and things begin to fall apart. But anyway.
And it also was expensive to get these processed and wait 2 weeks, get back, and you just paid, a pretty good chunk of money, and you get your slides back and you find out, you got 24 blank slides, or in case where once I had shot a great roll of tornado film, and I thought I had wound it back, but I didn't. Yeah. And I opened up the back of the camera and just exposed it all. So, right. I mean, things like that always have happened there, but it was expensive. So on a college kid's salary, you take a limited amount of shots. And even David Hoadley only took 3 or 4 shots for a typical storm. We weren't, taking thousands of photos with this kind of thing. That just was not possible in those days on my salary, and everybody really used film sparingly.
I would always regret the fact that I only had one image of a particular storm,
right?
Or maybe like you say, not just blank slides, but you'd sometimes discover you had 24 or 36 fuzzy out of focus shots because you hadn't checked your focus. So, but that you could do that with a digital camera.
It got me thinking of when I first learned Fortran on a computer. My first Fortran class, they actually made me write a Monte Carlo loop on a punch card just so I would appreciate how efficient a computer was. And maybe photography classes these days with DSLR should make everyone start with film.
Yeah, could be. I finally got into medium format late in my chase career, and that made something of a difference. So 35 millimeter SLR, once I was gainfully employed, I could afford to buy lots of film. So I didn't have any problem with the number of exposures. But with all that film, you got to get so many things right. I still think with digital cameras, it's easier to get it right.
Right.
But it's also easier to screw up with film.
Was so when I was going through a lot of these old photos, and it clearly looks like someone did a tremendous amount of work scanning a lot of old photographs, I found a lot of photographs of both you and Al and some others taking pictures of wildflowers.
Oh, yeah.
Was that kind of like a second hobby? I mean, listening on
another passion we shared.
But I'm a huge wildflowers is something that's very interesting to me. Did that just come about because you're in between storms, or how did you get into it?
More or less that's it. You'd be between storms and you'd be going along, and here'd be this gorgeous patch of wildflowers somewhere. And unless we were in the middle of a steaming hot storm chase, neither one of us minded stopping. We may have missed a few storms that way, but I can't remember any of really serious events like that where we missed it because we were out screwing around with wildflowers.
Well, Chuck,
Al and I also liked old abandoned buildings.
Yeah, Chuck, didn't you and Al take blocks of time off rather than just spot chase on a day?
Right.
So you'd fill in between storm systems with something like, well, let's go to the Davis Mountains and shoot some wildflowers.
Yeah.
While you're waiting for the atmosphere to recharge again.
That's right. One year we went all the way to Utah. And I ended up seeing a couple of really nice national parks that way.
Let me jump to 1984. We're going to go into the 80s here. We've been talking the 70s. We're trying to take this in order. So I was a young guy in Dallas at Channel 4. We expected a stratiform rain event. This was about 2 weeks before Christmas, 1984. Overrunning, cool, stable, seemingly.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
Don't use the word overrunning.
Oh, okay. I'll never use it again. I'm done with it.
Good.
And so a tornado plowed through Mesquite, which is just east of Dallas. This was an F3, and there was no watch, there was no warning, there was no outlook. And I don't know if you guys remember that deal, but Al, I think, went in with Skip Ely, and at the time Skip was the MIC in Fort Worth, and they did a case study on that. And to me, that was one of the first really good studies that tornadoes always don't touch down in classic friendly environments. The convective weather can be really, really messy. Did you guys remember that event at all, by any chance, the 84 Mesquite tornado?
I wasn't involved with it, so...
Yeah, it was a low cape, low top storm event that happened. Really was one of those sneaker events. the local spotter net wasn't even activated. So it was totally caught people off guard in that regard. Plus, it's 2 weeks before Christmas, so it's like, what are the odds of getting something like that? So it really was missed on all fronts, but it was studied. And today we know about low cape, low top events, but back in those days, that was not the kind of thing that was recognized beforehand. But that's why they learned about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they learned about dry line bulges. They learned about triple points. So they learned about all that. That was the breaking time.
It's putting the science into practice.
Right. And it helps. It helps us today because where we are, that's mostly what we deal with. That's what we do here. And I think that event in '84 started the process to learn about those type events. And I look back, and again, Al was directly involved in that with Skip in terms of information that we still use today that's used to help save lives. And Moeller had such a tremendous impact on this science. But let's jump ahead to the 1986 Windhorse, Texas tornado. Remember that one, Chuck? 86?
Windthorpe. Yes, I remember.
Talk about that experience.
If I remember the same one.
You guys started up in Oklahoma near Snyder, and then you dropped south across the Red River to sample another storm near Windthorpe, which was HP. And there's no way you're going to be able to see a tornado in an HP, but you guys found that little magic notch to get into and see the seas part, as it were, and see that tornado there.
Yeah, that's the one that Gene Moore was on too, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. That was, to me, that was miraculous. From my perspective, chasing with Al, I was grateful that I chased with Al because there aren't many people who could have done what we did and capture that tornado. I know it turned out that you and Roy and some other people ended up chase their convergence with us there. But, I think Al was a primary source of inspiration for our chase that day. I can remember some similar events, but that was a signal event. Somebody got video of me videoing the storm. I think that was Roy. And in the background, you can hear Al's voice. He's still exclaiming about what a great thing it is. He was always ceaselessly excited. Actually, I don't show my emotions that easily. I tend to be quiet when I'm experiencing a storm and don't want to talk much. Al, on the other hand, was very verbose. He let us know what he was seeing and thinking. I didn't consider that a character flaw in the slightest. My big policy with storm chasing, and in particular with chaser convergences, was don't talk to me while the damn tornado's going on. I'll be happy to talk with you after it's on, spun out and done its thing. Leave me the hell alone so I can concentrate on, what I have to do. But of course, that storm was really cooperative. Hardly moved at all. And we had a good view of it too.
And then we had Hodges in '89. That was just absolutely awesome.
Yep. Yeah,
Hodges. We're literally doing a dance there out in the field. I got them. They were crossing each other, and of course, Al was hooping it up. He was just screaming about it as it tornado descended. Very close to us. Very close.
Yep. Yeah. How far away would you estimate it was?
I did a survey on that one. It was within a half mile. Yeah. It hit a mobile home, actually. That's where the debris initially started on the thing. And then, unusual as tornadoes are that time of year, it was high based, and this tornado actually moved south, went from north to south.
Right. Yep. Really interesting event. And I think they had I think OU had a Doppler radar that they used on the storm.
Yep.
I don't know. I now don't recall seeing any publications about it, but I know they were there.
That was in the primitive Doppler. I think they asked Howie about it, and they had it set up wrong or something, and
they just didn't get any data.
Yeah, I don't think they got much in the way of good data from that event.
They had some trouble with those early radars.
Right.
We were still learning how to do this kind of stuff.
Go ahead, Jen. Go. Jump in there.
I've been chomping at the bit here to try to get us into the 90s because first of all, Dr. Doswell, it's an honor to meet you. And my experience with Al is very limited, but it's primarily from reading some of his chase logs. And I would love it if you would take us through the June 8th, 1995 Pampa event.
Jeez. Okay, we started out that morning in Colorado, and we woke up, and it was 50-something degrees with cold rain. And normally we would, once we get up, we'd start looking at data. Well, there was no looking at data. It was very clear that we had to get south. So we just piled our stuff in the car and drove south, got into the Texas Panhandle, and everything cleared up. You could see the storms to our east. And so I called back to NSSL and talked to Harold Brooks. And he says, oh, there's a couple of storms there that look interesting on radar. He said, why don't you just take this road? And it was the road that led into Pampa. Take this highway and you should intercept it somewhere near Pampa. So that's what we did. And we started driving into Pampa, and we could see that there was a funnel cloud. And then the precip from the storm got in the way, so we had to keep going east. We got into Pampa and drove south on what we now know as Price Road. And to our southeast, there was a multi-vortex tornado going on, almost completely transparent, but you could see debris whirls and suction vortices that would occasionally form. And it was moving right at us toward the northwest, from southeast to northwest. And, we weren't in any danger. It wasn't close enough to be dangerous. But when it got closer to us, then instead of moving toward the northeast, it moved more toward the west, which is really bizarre. And then it began to move toward the north. So its movement was very interesting. I think there could be a study of that storm someday if we got our act together to try to figure out what was going on there. But then it produced out of the rotation that had been the multi-vortex tornado, out of that rotation descended the elephant trunk tornado. And we were on Price Road, we had driven south almost to the railroad tracks, and the tornado crossed the tracks and then went on into this industrial part of town, Pampa. And so all we had to do was turn around and drive a short distance with it. We could keep up with it. It wasn't moving very fast. And I don't know how close we were at some point, but I would guess around a third of a mile. But both Al and I were very conscious of falling debris, and it was sort of a bubble that we refused to penetrate. If we got close enough to be hit by falling debris, obviously that would not be a good thing. But so the tornado went on and continued through that industrial park, then moved again toward the northeast and dissipated. And Al and I he was shooting exclusively slides, and I was shooting almost exclusively film footage, video. And so we were both pretty well exhausted by the emotional impact of what we had just seen. And I discovered my mouth was dry. And I thought, well, either I've been standing here filming this tornado with my mouth open, which is a possibility, or the excitement level was so strong I got dry mouth. Anyway, Al got some of the greatest photographs of that tornado possible. I got a couple of good ones early when we were down by the railroad tracks, but then I was exclusively concentrating on video.
And the roar, Chuck.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And of course, it was, if you listen to the video uncensored, you'll hear me saying, this tornado is tearing this town to shit. Because to me, that's what it looked like it was doing in that industrial park. And that was the most dramatic debris I think I've ever seen in person. But that chase was, with Harold Brooks' help, we got vectored onto the right storm. But basically, it was one of the easiest chases I've ever done. We just drove right to the tornado, sat there and shot video and film until it was over. And then we chased the storm farther to the northeast, and it produced 4 or 5 other tornadoes. We never got a good look at them because the terrain gets kind of ugly in that part of the Texas Panhandle. But there was another tornado nearby that had been ongoing while the Pampa tornado was ongoing. And it became a big cone. And Martin Licious got a bunch of footage of that when it was near the prison. So, yeah, it was quite a chase. It certainly has to be up there with my top 10 if I engaged in such things. Yeah, it doesn't have many competitors.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Chuck, that was a really fun story, and I'm hoping to get a couple more fun stories by shifting a little bit to something you brought up that you have also done in your chase career, which is to lead tours. And I'm actually really interested, in light of what you said about the tornado experience, that everyone around you needs to be silent so you can really enjoy that experience. Tell us about leading chase tours and what that's like. And did you also command silence from the paying patrons on your tours so that you could appropriately enjoy the tornado? What was that like?
Those circumstances where that would be a problem never came up, as it turned out. So I didn't have to gripe at my clients. I actually found that the clients were the highlight of the whole experience. It was fun. This was when I'd been storm chasing for 30 years when I first started with Tempest. And so I maybe can consider myself a bit jaded. I've seen quite a bit. But seeing it through somebody's eyes who's never seen anything even remotely like it was really a lot of fun. So I enjoyed participating on the tours. I want to correct something. I never led any tours. My official task was to talk with the clients, tell them what I was seeing, help them understand what they were seeing, and maybe teach them a little bit about storms. And that was fun too. I enjoyed that. And there was a lot of interesting angles that showed up. When you deal with groups of people, the group dynamics is always very interesting. And for the most part, we had really good chase clients. But every once in a while, you get somebody who was a real jerk off. And it was everything I could do to keep from smashing them in the face sometimes. We had a guy who was one of these. He's probably autistic, okay, and he was really fussy about what he ate, and when he would go into the bathroom, it would take him 20 minutes to pee because he would have to wash his hands for 15 minutes after he peed. He was kind of, shall we say, obsessive about certain things, and that's the sort of thing that really is kind of a distraction.
There's so many show titles in this segment that I'm going to have a really hard time. Okay. Wow, this is too good. This is too good.
You asked for it.
No. Kim, you started this. This is great.
Yeah. I know I did. Honestly, I asked the question in part because I was hoping that we could extract some of the true Chuck Doswell and his feelings about things into this conversation, because it's really, if we don't have a conversation, Chuck, where you just let out your raw emotion, we really haven't spoken with you. So I one of the things that some of us were doing while we were getting ready for this show is looking back on your many essays on various things. You've already upbraided Span about the use of overrunning. I'm curious if you have a favorite essay that you have written, something that you are particularly fond of, or just either a piece of advice or a piece of guidance for the field of meteorology that you'd care to share.
Well, if I were going to brag about anything, it would be the 79 paper with Les Lemon. And also I would brag about getting Al to write the chapter in the monograph about severe storms forecasting. I couldn't think of a better person to write that chapter. And of course, he did a wonderful job, which is true of most everything he ever did. I don't know. As far as essays go, I can crank out essays easily enough. And it's hard for me to get enthused about any particular one of them. I'm always passionate about it when I write them, but that doesn't always last.
Chuck, can I ask you, Troy here, can I ask you a question? Because I know you've written on this before. And with you and with Tim and with Al and the storm chasing of the past, let's flash forward to the storm chasing of 2021 and yet pull COVID out of all this. But what do you think about what we see nowadays, which I think, I know for some people it really troubles them.
Well, I see a lot of things. There's grown up around chasing a certain kind of ethos that tolerates people risking their lives and risking the lives of other people. I call that sort of chase yahoos. And unfortunately, with any group, the bigger the group gets, the more likely you are to have extreme sort of views. And I think the growth of chasing has unfortunately led to an awful lot of these yahoos who occasionally break traffic laws and endanger other people that way, or they constantly are trying to get into the tornado, which strikes me as very stupid. Of course, a lot of the guys, I remember you may have seen it. There's a video out there where some guy is screaming, "I'm in the tornado, I'm in the tornado." You can see the video. He's not in the damn tornado. Who's he trying to kid? Good grief. But, that's the way it goes.
Didn't Al Mohler write on storm chase ethics like back in the early 90s, a long, long time ago?
Yeah, I think he did.
He wrote for Storm Track.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, he inspired me to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he saw this coming. And also he developed the first spotter training class, but then in the 90s, wasn't that about the time he wrote the advanced class that so many people have been taking since then?
Well, the advanced class grew up out of the fact that our original efforts in the 1970s version of spotter training, we had only been chasing for a couple of years, and we were guilty of overgeneralizing from our limited experience. So we had to, in the so-called advanced training, readdress some of the issues that we had talked about in the first materials and repair them in light of new findings. Well, that's kind of the way science works. You write about what you think you know, and, something comes along and knocks that into a cocked hat. So you have to rethink it. That's good. There is no final word.
But what would be the greatest legacy that Al has left us, fellas? I'll ask both Tim and Chuck, both of you, that question.
I'll let Tim go first.
Well, for me, it's first of all and foremost, it's the friendship that we have. There are very few people that you run across in your life that you can share your desire and passion with in terms of this sport we call storm chasing. And it really was amazing to be his friend. And it was just like, don't see him for maybe 6 months, 8 months.
Right.
And you walk into the room and boom, it's just like, he was there all the time.
Yeah.
It's just this camaraderie, which was wonderful. Back in the early days, storm chasing people who did this was a small group. It was less than 100 people. And so to have someone so close here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who has the same passion, it was just a wonderful. I'd see him all the time in AMS local meetings, and then we'd go out and eat dinner. So it was really nice to have that. So the legacies, of course, there's so many. I mean, and so much so that I talked to Chuck and I said, Chuck, let's write a paper on this. And so he said, well, maybe we should get Les Lemon involved. And then I said, well, maybe we should get Sam Barraclough involved. So we actually had this several co-authors, and we published this in one of the severe local storm. And I think you can Google it. If you Google Al Moeller storm chaser, it might be able to pop up in one of these Google searches. But if you're interested in Al Moeller, read that. You'll see that he contributed greatly to operational forecasting, also in training in the spotter program, and was just an all-out great friend.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Tim's assessment, but when it comes to Al's contribution, you forgot to mention his contributions to the science itself. Not only did Al make a strong commitment to applying science in his forecast work, but he actually contributed research and helped produce publications that are still being used today, of course. So he sort of embraced a notion that really appealed to me, and that was this idea of, I felt like my task that I set to myself was to improve the level of science and operational forecasting however I could. And that meant training forecasters maybe in the science and spotter training and all that other stuff.
And you co-authored a lot of papers with Alan, did you not?
Yes. I'm very proud of those. So, but Al's legacy is hard to contain. There are probably lots of things that he did that were of service to other people, and we didn't know anything about him. He wasn't the sort that would put this stuff on a sheet of paper and wave it in front of your face. He was always, he just assumed that he was doing what he had to be doing, didn't think it was particularly worthy of recognition. I think it was.
Another thing, Chuck, that I think we have to mention is the hand-drawn analysis using colored pencils. He was an avid analyst and really encouraged me to do the same, to pick up those little nuances in the data that are very important. And I'm glad to see that has spread to others who just don't look at a computer screen today.
Right.
Print it out, hand draw, get those fronts in there, find out the little nuances, where the drawline bulge is, and do that kind of plotting.
My whole approach was sort of built around doing that. That was what I committed to early in my career. Why would we do hand analysis? What do we get from hand analysis? Well, I'll tell you what you get. You get familiarity with the atmosphere.
Right.
And familiarity with the atmosphere means you have a better base upon which to build your forecast. As an exercise, Maddox and I used to give a pre-test in the flash flood forecasting course. And it was a series of questions that Bob had developed in order to find out the level of knowledge that forecasters have before we started the course. And it was appalling to see how badly understood most forecasters were about what's going on. So, for instance, we had a sounding that we sort of showed schematically, and we said, all right, here we are at this level. What's the temperature and humidity and wind? You know, what does the upper air look like at that level? What does it look like at this level? We found out that people were so ignorant of the atmospheric structure by spending all of their time looking into a console, they couldn't tell the difference between a good day and a bad day. Hmm. And good and bad, not be sure you understand my context for good. A good day is tornadoes. So that's a chaser's perspective. At any rate, I agree with Tim completely. There's so many aspects of Al. I don't know how many times I went to conferences and he'd be up there, he'd be giving a really great presentation of him, whatever he was talking about. But the highlight would be the end of his talk when he'd throw in some free slides, extra bonus slides of his storm chasing adventures. And
Chuck, another thing is his oratory ability.
Yes.
He was able to engage an audience.
Right.
He was able to, you listen to his talk and you become excited yourself. But given what he is doing, he instilled that to everybody in that audience. So it was a joy to listen to him speak. And he would be able to simplify things pretty well so that people could understand it.
He didn't dumb it down. He didn't say inaccurate things. If he said things that were simple, it's because he had the ability to find those words. But,
he brought in a hose. Remember that garden hose he brought in?
Yeah.
Talking about streamwise vorticity and rotation and how it's tilted up into the vertical.
And throw a football to talk about that same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's a difference between a football spiral and a football end for end. Two different kinds of shear.
Right.
Yeah, the thing about Al, I keep coming back to this because I consider it so important. He was the embodiment of what I was trying to create in the Weather Service. People who were committed to using science to to make their products more accurate. And if they learn something, a scientist knows you have to share it. It doesn't do any good if you keep it to yourself. It dies with you. But if you write it up and publish it, this reminds me of another anecdote. I'm not sure it's appropriate to inject here, but maybe I'll skip that. There's so many.
Oh, go ahead.
Might as well.
Go ahead.
Inject all the things.
Go.
No, I'm not going to do it.
All right, go on.
I'll defer that for another conversation.
Dr. Doswell, it's Aubrey here. I was wondering if you could, you're kind of talking about the teaching and things like that. Can you talk about some of the advanced spotter training that you guys were not just teaching, but coming up with the material, and what was the reaction? How would you just, the response from some of the spotters? How would you kind of get that word out to a lot of the people in the area to get them to come to some of these training sessions?
Well, of course, the spotters typically have at least one training session every year, maybe two. And so it's natural. There are already mechanisms in place to spread that knowledge. The trick was putting it together and making sure we were as close as possible to the science we're trying to use. And there are limits on how good once you put it into publication, it's frozen. And the thing is that our field continues to change. And so these things need to be updated and revised on a regular basis. Well, we didn't create the spotter training program to make sure that our names were, captured forever and our ideas written on tablets of stone. That wasn't at all.
Who did the graphics, Chuck? Who did the graphics on the spotter? You did all that HP, LP, those kinds of cross sections.
Yeah. Now, Joan Kimple in the advanced spotter training converted those into higher quality images, but she just basically reproduced what I drew.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a lot of the schematics because we didn't have a drafts person, and I knew a little bit about drafting, so I did most of that. Yeah, when I think about those schematics, there's things I would change, but that's sort of the perfect illustration of the point I was making, that these things need to be revised. By the way, that reminds me that we're really overdue for another tornado symposium.
We are. We really are.
There needs to be another one. It's been a long time.
Talk about toward the end of Al's career, fellas, his retirement and toward the end of his life, the Alzheimer's thing. That was hard. I know it was hard on both of you.
Yeah. Well, let me tell that story. Al and I shared an interest in drag racing, as I've already mentioned, and there's a big National Hot Rod Association drag race meet in the Dallas area around Ennis every year. And Al and I went to that a couple of times. Well, at the end of his career, at the end of his time, I went there, and Al and I were going to go to the drag races, and it was brutally hot, which of course you expect in that area that time of year in early September. And we went to the first day's events, and we were coming home, and Al wasn't sure how to get home. And of course, that's the Alzheimer's. And we get to his house, and he changes out of his clothes because they're all sweaty and dirty. And he looks at me and he says, "Do I know you?" And I said, "Al, we've been friends for 40 years. And he said, "Huh, that's amazing." And that just freaked me out. And I'm sorry to say that I never went back. I got in my car and went home. And I lost the price of the tickets and all that. I didn't care about any of that. I was so depressed that I had been talking to a shell of the man that I once knew. And the man that I once knew is gone. That was hard. Thanks for Tim and Carson and some of the other guys in the local area. They kept visiting him and, did what they could to make him feel better about himself. And all that. I'm really grateful that they did that. But I couldn't face him again.
Tim, what?
Yeah, we routinely went and saw Al. That first year of his decline was fairly gradual, and he was losing details left and right. And
Sounds clear.
Yeah, the final year was very rapid. He was basically a vegetable, didn't know who anybody was. It's a cruel disease.
And he knew this. He could tell it was happening to him. It wasn't that he was blissfully ignorant. He knew damn well, and he knew what the future held.
Yeah, he became frustrated initially. Initially, it was frustrated when you forget something, and you don't even recognize. He had walked around the block, came back to what he thought was his house, and it was a block off, and tried to get into the house, and the police were called by the homeowner, and he thought it was his house, but it was a block off. So incidents like that had happened, and finally they had to put him into a facility that deals with Alzheimer's patients because he was a danger to himself and others. And that's. But we saw him fairly regularly. He has a devoted wife, Patty, and she was there all the time.
He went through a pure hell.
Absolutely. I got to see this, and I hope that this doesn't happen to anybody else I know. It's just a cruel disease.
Yep.
So,
the thing that's really frustrating is Al had been looking forward to his retirement.
Yeah.
Because then he was going to really get out there and do photography. And so that option vanished overnight.
And go on vacations and, just take time off to enjoy life. That's what retirement is for.
What do you guys think Al would think about the Chase community today?
I think his viewpoint.
I think you have a few choice words like Chuck would have,
I think
about what's going on.
I think Al and I saw that pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, what are your thoughts on the current state of the Chase business?
No.
My thoughts on the current Chase business is I wish them all good luck, and I hope they become responsible. The ones that are maybe acting irresponsibly. But I have no hopes that actually would happen.
Yeah. I just don't like the crowds. There's conga lines of chasers out there. So I've gone back to a little secret here, and I've gotten one of these things. And I actually look at the roads that are off the beaten path. And that's where you'll find me, not on the main highway where all the looky-loos are, and trying to find out where the storms are, because you get everybody out there. It's not just storm chasers. It's the locals, too, that are out there. And they want to go out there, and they're not. I see people stopping near the roadside, taking pictures of nothing but rain shafts.
Right.
Have no idea what they're doing. Have no idea. They see some movement in the cloud. They stop. Sometimes blocking traffic, sometimes going very slow. It's actually very frustrating at times.
And the thing is that chasing has become much easier. When I started chasing, it was pretty evident that if we were going to get a chase forecast, we would have to create it for ourselves. There wasn't any mechanism for doing that. So. With all of that gear that we have now, all the equipment we have now, it's much easier to chase. You don't have to know diddly squat about meteorology. You can go out there and you chase into the middle of the convective outlook. If there's a watch issued, you try to get into that. And then you just have your radar. You can track the storms and all. It's relatively easy to be a chaser today. Much more difficult than the past.
Yeah, when in doubt, just look at where all the red dots are on radar.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where you want to go.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, but guys, I mean, do they realize this is inherently dangerous? I guess that's my question, because it almost seems like the media glorifies this so much that that's what's triggering these people going out. But where we hear people we had spotters killed a couple of years ago in an accident at a stop sign, I think in the Texas Panhandle, that were out chasing. And I'm just wondering if they understand the inherent danger.
Well, I think many of them understand the dangers, but seem to be living under the misconception that they're exempt, that's never going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are too many variables in this to predict it with any accuracy. And all it takes is one moment of carelessness, and you may end up either dead or responsible for causing the death of someone else. And to me, that's just unacceptable. But, you know, I've been on record as being opposed to this in many, many essays. And yet, of course, what I get from the participants in these Yahoo chases is nothing but scorn and insults from them. Of course, considering the source, I consider that a compliment.
You know, I'm trying to sort out what show title. I think Chase Yahoos has to be the situation. That's got to be it for this show. I call them jabronis, but Chuck calls them Yahoos, so we'll keep it at Yahoo. But to me, I see so many of these younger people that want to get out and go live on TikTok. Chuck, are you on TikTok, by the way?
Are you kidding? No.
So you know, they want to go live on TikTok, or they're influencers, which has a lot of money, and they're going to get all these likes and shares and clicks, or they just want to get YouTube, Google AdSense money. Maybe I'm going to get 1 million views on this thing, and I'm going to get $500.
I think your point is focused on what are they trying to do? What are these people trying to accomplish? And, you know, I think self-aggrandizement is behind a lot of this. You know, get that shock video. Get that, you know, I'm in the tornado moment. And even if it's not true. So, you know, I think that's corrupted a lot of chasers.
And quite frankly, most of these young people, Chuck, they don't want to be television meteorologists. They want to be social media influencers because there's more money over there.
Yeah,
and,
could be.
You know, you get a riveting, you know, tornado or rain shaft, like you say, then that's going to get them more likes and clicks and engagement scores, and I don't know. We're just living in different times, but I do have great concern that most of these influencers that are trying to do this have zero training, zero, and that's only going to lead to trouble. But I hate to stop this because this has been too good, but we're almost out of time here. And again, Chuck and Tim, if you guys need to run, you guys run. Get while the getting's good. We have to hit Tony Rice. And Jen's got This Week in Tornado History. We're going to do the email segment, and we're going to do Picks of the Week, where we share something that is really cool. And I think most of our picks will involve Al Mohler tonight. But Chuck and Tim, thank you guys. And again, if you can stay, that's great. But if you got to take off, you guys take off. It was great having both of you. You guys are legends, and thanks to you for what you've done for this science.
Before we sign off that, I want to say that you're a legend yourself.
Nah, I'm just an old man.
There's nobody better in the weather broadcasting business, in my opinion, than you.
Well, coming from you, that's the ultimate compliment. I can't thank you enough. But I mean, I for those that don't know, back when I was young, I would sit back and read Chuck's preprints of these AMS papers that he would write, and it just he turned me on to the light bulb would come on. When it comes to severe local convective storms, this guy knows more than anybody else on the planet. So I hate that you're retired, but it's cool that you're still hanging around us folks sometimes.
Sure.
But you're the greatest. So, again, if you guys can hang in there, fine. If you got to run, that's fine. But we got to hit a couple of recorded segments. Let's go to Tony Rice, and we'll come back with Jen's This Week in Tornado History. And then we're going to come back with email segment, Weather Roundup, Picks of the Week, and more as Weather Brains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Last Thursday, an X1 class solar flare erupted from an Earth-facing sunspot. prompting forecasters at NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center to issue a G3 geomagnetic storm watch. This got a lot of people looking out for aurora, not just in the upper reaches of Alaska, Canada, and Europe, but possibly down into the lower 48 United States. That solar flare's effects were felt a little over 8 minutes later on Thursday morning as X-rays traveled at the speed of light. But that's not what causes aurora. It's the coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, that spit out plasma and charged particles, essentially a concentrated form of the solar wind that the sun is constantly hurling outward. When that CME finally arrived, it was hours late and more of a whimper than the hoped-for roar. So what happened? Why was the solar storm a bust? Forecasting auroral activity really isn't that unlike forecasting snow. There's a lot of variables, and they all have to line up just right to create the conditions to produce a significant event. There's also a bit of wish casting going on, too. That's why when you hear a heliophysicist talk about aurora and events like this, the word you'll hear them use most often is possibility. You see, we really don't know a whole lot more until the CME passes that first spacecraft standing watch between the Earth and Sun, about 5 lunar distances away. This gives us about 30 minutes lead time with some key measurements that finally give some concrete information. NOAA forecasters estimated that Thursday's CME left the Sun at 973 kilometers per second, but when it arrived, it was several hours late and less than half that speed. The same's true of other key measurements of things like particle density and temperature. So in all, these numbers from NASA's ACE and NOAA's Discover spacecraft indicate that the CME had more of a glancing blow than a direct hit. There was one component, though, that did go in the right direction. Earth's magnetic field is positively charged. Just like the bar magnets that you may have played with in elementary school, the positives and negatives attract. So negatively charged solar wind is going to link up better and stream more of those charged particles into the upper atmosphere where aurora are created. Compare this weekend's events to the Halloween storms of 2003, when each of those numbers were significantly higher. Solar wind speed jumped to 1,200 kilometers per second, and temperature spiked as well. The result? Aurora were seen as far south as Texas. Now, this isn't the last solar storm we'll see, certainly. We're just beginning the 11-year ramp-up of the current solar cycle. More and larger sunspots will spawn, and they're going to violently belch out more plasma. Most of this will race harmlessly out into space, but the Earth-facing ones will prompt warnings and watches. Just like snow forecast, some will bust, others will not. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, at least 14 tornadoes hit across southeastern Texas and southwestern Louisiana on November 7th, 1957. It was one of the worst outbreaks to occur across this portion of the country. We have a summary about the strongest tornado of the day, an F4, that hit in Orange, Texas. We also include a link from Sam Schamberger, forecaster for the National Weather Service. He did an in-depth review of the entire outbreak. At Orange, 180 homes were destroyed. 115 of these were in the Riverside Housing Project. 9 ships and 3 barges were torn from their moorings. There was one fatality. A pregnant woman was killed at 2nd Street and John Street in Orange. Her name was Annabelle Peck. She was pinned beneath the wreckage of her 2-story frame dwelling. Sam Schamberger noted that the F4 rating is questionable because the quality of the housing in the area was poor. He felt an F3 rating would have been more accurate. He also noted that there were reports in the Orange Leader that the tornado was dissipating into a downburst as it moved into the housing project. Quote, however, it is possible the tornado crossed into Louisiana before lifting.
Well, let's just dive into the email inbox and see if there's anything in there this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, Kim's got me distracted. She guys, do any uplifting tornado stories exist? I'm not quite sure that there are any, but at least I don't tell any, that is. So let's go to the email. I have a few for us here. First of all, I thought this would be a good question not to only ask James, but also Chuck and Tim. But where do you think weather forecasting will be in the next 10 to 20 years? That's from Central Alabama Weather Authority. Weather forecasting.
Forecasting in general?
In the next 10 to 20 years.
You know, I think to me, part of the problem is we're still using the, radio signs that are launched every 12 hours. And until we can figure out a way to get really good quality real-time upper air data, I'm not so sure will be that much better. And again, where I am, the biggest struggles, it's, air mass convection. I can't tell people at 7 o'clock in the morning on a July day where it's going to rain at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. To me, that's the greatest challenge. Once we figure that out, and somebody will, it's when it gets better. And then obviously down here in the deep south, it's winter storms. But to me, the part of the solution, it's real-time upper air data. And how that happens, we'll see.
What do you think, Tim? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
we depend a lot on models, numerical models, but they're only as good as what data goes in there. So, Jim, just hit it on the head. We're launching balloons, for crying out loud. I mean, how long has that been going on for? But we don't have remote sensing capabilities that are accurate enough to scan through the atmosphere and give us a sounding that is reasonable. I mean, I've seen pretty crude sounding analysis still with satellites. So we have to have more quality information. And then it's not just with the U.S. For numerical models to work, we need this globally. We need it out in the oceans as well as in Mexico and Canada, so that we can have a better handle on it, because the models are not going to be improving very much if we don't have that quality of data.
What do you think, Chuck? You have any comments on that, forecasting in the future?
Yeah, I think I agree with Tim and James that data is a big issue in terms of the quality of the forecast. But I hate to say it, I really do hate to say it. I think 20, 30 years from now, there won't be any human forecasters at all, except maybe in the private sector. I think public service weather is going to be computer generated, even if it's not the ultimate accuracy. I've always said a human gives you the capability to do something that the computer models would never be able to do. But the computer models win by consistency. They're not so wrong that there's a huge penalty associated with their inaccuracies, and they never go on strike. They never have sick leave. They never send nasty memos up the chain of command, and they never get retirement. I mean, if they're retired, then nothing else happens. So I think the future of humans in weather forecasting is coming to an end. Sorry.
All right. Well, that's more depressing than my tornado story. Okay, moving along. No.
Well, I could be wrong, of course.
No. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. That's for sure. Quick comment from Richard Cook in the Western Isles. Wanted to know if we could do movie reviews every week because he couldn't stop laughing from last week's show. So apparently he liked our analysis of 13 minutes. So
I got too cranky, I think.
So. I'm still excited to see what you really think of it when you actually watch the movie. So, and then Rob Strecker, I read his email last week, and he wanted a show of bloopers, and we thought our entire show is a blooper. But what he wanted to clarify for us was, TV Mets, and also he threw in radio Mets I've never had any bloopers, so I don't know if I can add anything to that. I'm just kidding. But never. Like Aubrey's hiccups, for example. He thought that would be fun to bring up and have a show about.
No, it's not. It's really not. It's really not. So, Rob, no, we're good.
That's funny. So anyway, something to consider in the future. But I do want to end with a story. It's a little longer, if I could. I just want to read through it. But this is from Brian Curran. And he has an Al Mohler story that I wanted to read.
Good.
Back when I was a journeyman forecaster in Fort Worth in the mid-'90s, I always enjoyed working mid-shifts with Al. On quiet nights, we would pull out the light box and the loop and look at 35-millimeter slides with old storm days we remembered. But one mid-shift was different. After a smoky day in May 97, thanks to many Central American fires, Al's high-temperature forecast for the day before at DFW didn't pan out, and Al was grousing about it. The wily HMT on duty commented that even as a lowly HMT, in his words, he knew that all the smoke would keep the highs down. Al reflected on that for a moment and ruefully said, all you can do is bat for average. Now, my mouth has gotten me into more trouble in my National Weather Service career than I care to admit, but I couldn't resist a comebacker telling Al that I guess that makes me the Ted Williams in this office. Al suddenly came unglued and jumped out of his chair. He told me in no uncertain terms that he'd kick my you-know-what outside, kick my you-know-what forecasting, and kick my you-know-what chasing. All this time, the HMT was snickering, knowing that he had set us both up. Al was upset, and he didn't talk to me for the rest of the shift and the next two after that. We knew Al could be one big walking hot button sometimes, and a few of us knew just where and how hard to push. We did laugh about it later, and things were good between us. I loved Al as a lead forecaster, a mentor, and as a friend. He would always push us youngster forecasters to be better, and I'd like to think we pushed him a little to be better too. I'll always cherish those quiet mid-shifts, talking about chasing or photography or solving the Bureau's problems or baseball or music, and I will always fondly remember the times I ran with Chuck and Al out across the plains in May and June. Life sucks sometimes, and it took away a great man too soon. I remember Al telling me his plans for retirement, chasing storms in spring and chasing colors in autumn. Al didn't get that chance, but I like to think he's somewhere in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park now, shooting leaves and waterfalls. Every time I see a supercell or a tree in replacent color, I'm getting choky here reading this, I'll think of the childlike joy Al had in seeing nature in her finest, and I can only pray that he is at peace. It's a wonderful email.
Yeah, Al was always willing to if anybody had questions or was confused about something, and Al thought he could have some value in trying to explain it, he would take as much time as anybody wanted. He was an open book to everybody.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So thanks, Jen. And Aubrey, I know you got to go, so let's get your pick of the weekend before you do television. Go.
Awesome. So mine is the Mid-Atlantic Chaser Con. Yay, this is our third year, and it's this Saturday in Richmond. And speaking of pioneers of storm chasing, David Hoadley is a friend of Mid-Atlantic Chaser Con. He presented his first presentation the first year was amazing. He had, one of the old wet Difax maps that he pulled out, and his cartoon drawings to demonstrate some of his stories was absolutely fantastic. So he's also talking again about some chase stories this time. So the pre-sales are done with, but you can still show up to the Science Museum in Richmond on Saturday and get your tickets. I believe we do still have some spaces left, but this might be something you can look at for next year. This really focuses on the Mid-Atlantic, and we're just so thrilled to be together again. So check that out, and maybe if not this year, next year. But we're so excited to hold it again, and it's a nice regional event. We're not Oklahoma, we don't pretend to be, and we don't pretend to be Alabama. But boy, do we have some interesting storms in the Mid-Atlantic.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aubrey. That's a great pick, and we'll have that up on the website. And before we do the other picks of the week and a quick weather roundup, I wanted to circle back over to Neil on Chuck's comments about humans kind of exiting the forecasting business. You as a former acting administrator of NOAA, what are your thoughts on that? I tend to agree. I mean, do you think that's going to be the situation, Neil? What are your thoughts on forecasting in 25 and 30 years?
Well, I think the traditional way that they're in the loop now may change, but I still kind of struggle to see humans not being involved. I'd like to think that humans will still be in charge of doing a lot of the development of the software. I think that there's a push for AI and machine learning and stuff like that, which is going to make the numerical weather prediction better. But we're still going to be on the hook for developing instrumentation to do the sampling unless we move away from NWP that uses initial value problems for the solutions. The other thing is I feel like no matter how sophisticated the modeling gets in the future, humans are still going to trust humans over a computer output. So maybe this gets more into Kim's realm than anything, but I think that they're going to trust the person that they know on whatever media platform they're subscribing to versus just an automated algorithm for output. So I think humans will still be there. I'm just not sure they'll be doing the same thing they're doing now.
Well, I can guarantee you they won't be doing the same things. If they're still around, they definitely, the office will have changed dramatically. But, I maintain that the economics of human forecasters become increasingly a challenge to keeping them at the job. The models will slowly get better, even without infusions of new upper air data. But of course, if we get more upper air data, we might actually get to the point where humans are just being crushed by the models. And there's the whole psychology associated with that. But I'm hoping I'm wrong. Let's put it that way. I would love to be wrong. Otherwise, what I essentially tried to do with my career for 40 years will become obsolete.
All right, well, time will tell. So let's do a quick weather roundup. We'll do Picks of the Week. We'll wrap this thing up. Weather roundup, we have Tropical Storm Wanda out in one of these, fish storms. We've got that out there, but otherwise the tropics are quiet. I guess the other story, Rick Smith, you got some cool air coming down your way, huh?
Yeah, it was like January here today. It felt like, I don't know, it was 52, but in January today it would have felt like, oh my God, it's so warm. But it's cool. I mean, we're finally into fall and winter-like weather, and I know for Kim's sake especially, and the people on the east side of Norman, maybe there won't be any more hail or tornadoes or anything like that. We did set a record in October in Oklahoma for most tornadoes ever recorded in the state. I think Kim's tornado may have been the one that took us over the edge. I can't remember, but we had 31 tornadoes in the state. That's more than the whole 9 months of the year before that, way more than May. So it's unusual to get the highest number of tornadoes in October. So hopefully we're done with that for a while. And I think I was listening to a previous episode and Kim said next up is ice storm season. So that's probably where we're heading next. But yeah, cool. Maybe parts of the area get their first freeze of the season this week, but then it warms up again for the weekend, and hopefully we can squeeze out a little bit more actual fall weather before ice storm season.
Okay, well, good deal. Well, that's the big stories, the cool air. But let's go right to Picks of the Week, and I've told you mine. Mine is Terrible Tuesday, and all this stuff is on YouTube, which is kind of cool. It's refreshing to be able to go back and see these videos. It just brings back very fond memories. So, Kim, what's your pick of the week? Go.
All right. Well, I sort of have a two-parter. My first pick of the week is a hearing that just took place this past week in the House Science Committee, and they were looking at the issue of the equity of outcomes in disasters. So they were looking at how is it that we can ensure that especially vulnerable populations are served before, during, and after hazardous weather events. And I think that there's a lot of great fodder in there for people to listen to. It featured, among other really great people, one of my sort of life heroes, Dr. Lori Peek at the Natural Hazard Center. And there just was a lot of amazing discussion about how, I think in meteorology, we get used to being spoiled by data. I know that there was commentary earlier about how limitations in data are going to be a big limit to our ability to do our science. But in the human side of the equation, we have even less. And we have so little, in fact, that it's difficult to know if the services provided by the federal government are equitable, if they're having an outcome that advantages certain people over others. We just don't even know. And there's a lot in there. So go ahead, Chuck.
If you don't keep track of outcomes, you can't possibly help yourself.
That's exactly the point that the GAO made. And it was a really important comment. It's something that at the lab we're trying to think about with the way that evolving forecast systems and warning systems might go. Can we collect the data that's needed to know what that even means for different populations? So that's really where the challenge is, and I really appreciated it. So it's a great hearing, certainly worth the investment of your time. The second part, when Bill Murray passed along a little bit about Al Mohler ahead of this, and the piece that Chuck and Tim, I think you both contributed to, highlighted that he had started the Skywarn program. I hadn't been aware of that. So my second pick of the week is the song Skywarn Spotter by John Fawcett, the one and the only. It's a classic and time-honored song at this point. If you haven't heard it, then I encourage you to listen to his entire Weather album. There's a lot of it's a little macabre. There's a lot of people who die in weather events in his songs, but it's very much worth the listen.
All right, it is what it is, and all these picks will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. Troy, what do you got for us this week?
Well, no, I had one thing that I had passed along back to the group earlier this week, and something I noticed, and mainly for the weather dweebs out there that are kind of used to seeing this, but there is a proposal out there. It is part of a public information statement from National Weather Service headquarters to discontinue the current format, the text format of what we call the PSH, which is the post-tropical cyclone report. It's sort of an in-depth version of an LSR, local storm report, but it is done post-hurricane. And they're talking about going to a CSV type file instead of having a text product. I've had my say about this. They were great about hearing it, and I put the PDF out there, James. Jessica Schauer is our NWS Tropical Program Manager. Got a great response from her. She came back and asked me some questions. I'm for having both the PSH, the text version, and then doing the CSV as well if they want to have that. But I find it easier for archiving purposes to be able to have the PSH. But that's just something in the works. And I've given James y'all the PDF, and you can attach that. Comment period for this runs until about the middle part of November.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that up on the website. Let's go to Dr. Neil Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, what's your pick?
So I think the first one I'm going to do is provide a link. I've always been fascinated with both photography and wildflowers, and there is an amazing photo that Chuck took of Al taking a photo of some wildflowers.
Yeah.
I think it sums up everything in this one particular scene. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit real quick, I guess this is technically my scientific pick of the week, is a paper by Fred Sanders and John Jackham, 1980. It's a well-known paper on the climatology of the bomb. And I feel like there's been some discussion on AMS listserv, on the MAP listserv just in the last couple of days. It seems like every 3 or 4 years, this becomes a new story in the news about bombogenesis. But just wanted to share the link to the original paper. It's nothing new. The term's been around for a long time, and apparently Fred had been using the term at MIT since the 60s. So even the 1980 paper was a little bit late for the term.
There you go. All right, and again, these will be up on weatherbrains.com. Jen, what's your pick of the week?
So here's the first line of Al Mohler's chase log for Pampa. Mention the word sunray, see storm data June 1971 to an old chaser, and you will invoke a response similar to that received by whispering rosebud to a newspaper tycoon or screaming out Roswell at a UFO convention.
Who else could do that?
Yeah. So my pick is the chase log. It's really awesome. It's got some of his photos in there too, which are amazing.
Right.
It's awesome. All right, Rick Smith, what's your pick of the week?
My pick is, we talked about it earlier, but it's a link to the video. It's about a 15-minute video, Tornado: A Spotter's Guide from 1977. Al Mohler narrates in his, as only he could do it. I didn't know this. I was reading Chuck and Al's paper about the history of storm spotting. And there was a line in there that said this video became the top-selling U.S. government film ever in peacetime. So I know it was very, very popular. We could still show it at spotter training today. It's still as valid, and I find myself doing indirect quotes of that when I'm doing my own spotter training. So the link to the video is there, and it's really interesting to watch.
Good deal. All right, Tim Marshall, what's your pick of the week?
Well, I'm going to kind of echo that, kind of a twofer here. First of all, Al Mohler's quote, "Look at that." I have used that thousands of times to try to engage an audience. I think that is just a wonderful line. He does this. You're sitting there comfortable in your chair and you're watching, him give a talk on Spotter, and he's showing a nice Ekman spiral, and then he shows his Borger shot, and he just screams it out. "Look at that!" And it's like, whoa, it's like that's a wonderful line. And my second pick of the week, totally off topic, guys. It's the Rolling Stones tomorrow night in the Cotton Bowl. 80% chance of rain, continuous. I'm going to be there. And you know what song I'm going to be singing? "Gimme Shelter."
I should have figured that one out. All right.
You should bring somebody along to tape it.
The Rolling Stones and the Cotton Bowl in the rain. That's awesome. All right, so Dr. Doswell, we have saved you for last. Give us a good pick of the week, something people can take with them. Go.
Well, this is a little bit strange, but my pick would be the paper that I did with Fred Sanders. And the reason I want to talk about that is because it embodies a lot of the principles that Al lived by as a forecaster and scientist about surface analysis and what it takes and what you're looking for, and the sort of things that influence the outcome of your forecast.
There you go.
If you use it properly.
That's perfect. Well, listen, again, Tim and
That's
Chuck,
on my
you.
website, by the way.
Okay, plug your plug away. Plug away. Go.
Yeah, all you got to do is go to my website, which is what is it? Oh, good grief.
Chuck Doswell is goodlooking.com, right?
Yeah. No. www.flame.org/tilde, which is the little wavy thing in the upper left corner, C. Doswell / /. That gets you to my homepage, and from there you can get to scientific publications.
All the essays are there, aren't they?
Essentially all of my publications. I've written so many essays in different media, it would take a gigantic book to contain them all.
Make sure you read his pet peeves before you start talking.
Yeah, I will never say overrunning again. That has been, my mouth is just never going to say that after this show tonight. So, Tim, anything you need to plug?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Plugging me?
Yeah, nothing.
I'll be the National Tropical Weather Conference has a series here on Wednesday. I'll be talking about my Hurricane Ida chase that I did last year. So that's something you can turn into. It's the National Tropical Weather Conference. You just Google that and you'll be able to find it.
Weren't you in like Iceland or somewhere recently?
Yes, I went to Iceland again. I went there when the volcano was erupting, and then I anticipated that the volcano was going to continue to erupt, and that didn't happen. So I had a volcano bust, and I'm used to busts, so it's like
aren't we all? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I had some beautiful weather and gorgeous rainbows and waterfalls, and I managed to time it just perfectly because I know where these waterfalls are. And I got some just absolutely stunning shots there. So I'm happy. Iceland is a photographer's paradise. I just wish Al had the chance to go over there because he would have just done some brilliant work.
Yeah, well, your photographs are stunning, and it's just excellent. But, hey, listen, we've got to wrap this thing up. It's been a long show, but a darn good show. All of the show notes are going to be on the website, weatherbrains.com. We're typically here Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. I'm still getting used to our new time. Most people watch live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but most of you listen. And we know that. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Jen, our new email officer, will be anxiously awaiting your emails. On behalf of the entire Weather Brains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.